Welcome to Nutrition 101. So this is the next installment in my 101 video series. For those of you that missed it, I did do a Fitness 101 course. It's about an hour long. It kind of breaks down from the ground up the protocols and fundamental tenets of exercise science, and then it ends with using those tenets and protocols to establish and build a proper strength training program to get started on whatever your fitness goals are. So definitely don't miss that. I wanted to do a nutritional video as well, just in tandem with that, since obviously no fitness program is going to work long term without a proper nutrition protocol as well. Couple caveats before we begin. So this is going to be for anybody who is on a proper strength training program and is looking to, maybe your goal is to look, improve your aesthetic goals, maybe it's strength and performance related. This is going to kind of cover all of those, and we're going to talk about how. If you do have some serious health concerns, or if you're in a disease state chronically or intermittently, if you're very overweight, if you have a lot of food restrictions, this might not be for you. Obviously, you'd want to discuss that more in depth with a dietitian or a coach like myself, or just any general medical personnel. But if you're unrestricted and you're working out and you want to look better, get stronger, feel better, this is going to support that. Last thing, kind of caveat, is just know that this is not the only road to Rome with nutrition, okay? So a lot of people think that they can kind of just like do whatever when it comes to exercise, but there's like, what's the diet? What's the best diet? What's going to get me there? And I always kind of tell people that thinking is kind of backwards, right? So in the gym, actually 90% or people rather should be doing about 90% of the same things no matter what the goals are. When it comes to nutrition, there are many roads to Rome, so to speak. And that can be because of just kind of more obvious things, like some people do have preferences or restrictions in what they can or want to eat. Some people might have moral or religious reasons for adhering to or excluding a certain food group. And it can also be due to regional differences in genetics. So somebody that's ancestors and their lineage is from the Amazon jungle is obviously going to have a genome that's adapted to way different food sources than someone that grew up closer to the Arctic Circle. And I've known people from various different regions throughout the globe who eat very differently, and they can all converge in the fact that if they dial things in, they can achieve the goals that they want to. So no one road to Rome, but if you are lost, if you are trying to get in better shape, this is a very tried and true method. I've used it successfully with clients, and even if we're going to tweak some things, we usually tweak it off of this, so this will be a good starting point for everybody. Last thing I'll say is that the best diet, and research backs this up, is the one that works for you. Okay, so there's no diet that's going to be better than the one that you can adhere to long term, that doesn't feel too restrictive, that you can make a lifestyle out of, so to speak. And again, it kind of goes with that many roads to Rome. Any positive changes that you make that you can stick to are going to pay off. So just know that going forward. First thing we're going to get into here is we first have to understand about macronutrients, so we can determine the ratios of macros that you need in relation to the number of calories that you need. So there are macro and micronutrients. Micronutrients are your vitamins and minerals, and macronutrients are going to be your fat, your carbs, and your protein. When we get into these, the first thing we have to understand is how many calories are in each gram of a macronutrient. So when we look at protein, there's going to be 4 calories per 1 gram of protein. Carbohydrates, there's also 4 calories per 1 gram of carbohydrates. And then fat, there's 9 calories per 1 gram of fat. So as you can see right off the bat here, fat has more than twice the calories per gram of protein and carbohydrates combined. And you're going to see how that plays out in the ratios we set here in just a moment. But before we can get to how many of each should I be eating in a day, the first thing that we have to determine is how many do you need, how many total calories rather do you need in a day? And we're going to work the macros off of that. So there are some quick formulas here for depending on what your goal is, right? So if you want to lose fat, we have a formula, we're going to get into it in just a moment. If you want maintenance, or what we call total daily expenditure, or TDE, those terms are all interchangeable. What that basically means is this is the amount of calories roughly that you're burning at rest now. So there's the amount of calories you need to intake to support your current weight. Now, we could use maintenance to stay the same weight or to recomp at the same weight. Recomp meaning get leaner at the same weight. And again, all these are just a ballpark. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to determine exactly how many calories you're burning or you need in a day. What we do is we use these formulas, we get you in a very good estimate of where you need to be based on the goal, and then we tweak from there, and I'll explain how to do that. So when we go through these formulas here, right, we have fat loss, we have maintenance, we just mentioned, we have weight gain. Obviously, when we're talking about weight, I would assume most people want to gain muscle with that. And same thing, weight loss, obviously, like I wrote here, we're talking about fat loss. Maintenance, again, being whether you want to stay the same weight or recomp at the same weight. And this is a formula, the maintenance formula is going to be what you could determine just to know this is about how many calories I am burning right now at my current body weight daily. These formulas are derived off folks that are physically active on the type of strength training program that I mentioned in Fitness 101. So just understand that. If you're sedentary, you're not going to really be able to push your carbohydrates up very high, or you're going to get fat unless you have a really good metabolism. But when we look at these formulas here, so what we can do is, depending on your goal, so let's say your goal is fat loss, you're going to do body weight, and you're going to multiply that by 10 to 12. Okay, so I always say for women or for those that have kind of a little more weight to lose, 10 or 11 is a good starting point. For men or for those that have a little bit better metabolism or not so much weight to lose, 12 is a good starting point. Body weight times 10 to 12, and then that total number, that's going to be your caloric intake for the day. Similarly, if your goal is maintenance, we do body weight times 12 to 14, same exact thing, lower end being women and those that have maybe more weight to lose, slower metabolism, higher end being men or those that have a faster metabolism or less weight to lose. And then when we get into weight or muscle gain, body weight times 14 to 16. Same exact thing there with the low and the high end. So again, it's going to give you a good starting ballpark. If I were coaching you, I use these formulas for clients. What we do is we calculate what they need. We start them on their strength training program. We reassess after the first few weeks. In the beginning, it might be 3 or 4 weeks. We reassess the way the clothes fit. If we're tracking the scale, is the scale moving? Are they getting stronger? Do they feel recovered and rested, etc.? And then we adjust accordingly in very small increments. So let's say your goal is fat loss. If you're not losing fat at the end of a few weeks from, let's say you started at 12, you did times 12 here, then what we would do is we would dock like a couple hundred calories from your total and then reassess after a couple more weeks. Conversely, if you're losing too much weight or you're not recovering fast enough, etc., we would up it by a couple hundred. Point being in me telling you that is that when we make adjustments, which will need to be made no matter what, as your body composition changes, you will need to adjust things. We don't want to go drastic with those changes. So a lot of people think, well, if I want to lose body fat faster, why can't I just go 500 calories under maintenance? Or similarly, if I want to gain muscle faster, why can't I just eat 500 calories more and do it faster? Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. If you eat too little calories and your goal is fat loss, you will stop losing body fat, you'll waste a lot of muscle, you'll go into starvation mode, you'll feel terrible, you won't recover, you'll crash your hormones, etc. And conversely, if your goal is muscle gain and you eat too many calories, you're going to gain a lot of fat, more fat than muscle with that. So unfortunately, the body does regulate things and we have to go conservatively. So once we have that number, so let's say we're going to do a little just kind of example here to take you guys through. I'm not going to write the math on the board. I'm going to just kind of do it in my head and hopefully I get the math right. So we're going to take, let's say I have a 150-pound female who has a little bit of weight to lose. And so we're going to take her body weight 150, we're going to do times 10, just picking 10 for her goals and a nice even number here, nice round number. So that'd be 1,500, or 150 times 10 is going to be 1,500 calories, total calories per day that she's going to need. What we're going to do with that now is we're going to work off of that to set protein, fat, and carbohydrates. Okay, so we're going to first set protein at 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. All right, so what I tell people is if you can get all your protein requirements in, just make it easy and shoot for a gram per pound of however much you weigh. So if it's 150 pounds in this case, 1 gram per 150 grams of protein, easy. If you struggle to get your protein goals in, you can go 0.8, even like 0.7. You don't want to be really doing too much less than that. But I tell people, try to shoot for that 1 gram. Protein is also the macronutrient that you are the least likely to get fat off of. Protein has a very what we call anabolic effect, which basically means like a fat burning, muscle enhancing effect, for lack of a better way to explain it in this kind of non-technical way. And so, you know, consuming a little more than less is always a good idea, especially if the goal is fat loss. Really, if it's muscle gain too, because as I'm sure most people hopefully know, you're going to need the protein to build muscle. So let's say we set it at 1 gram per pound. So that's 150 grams of protein. Next, we set fat. All right, we're going to do that at 0.4 grams per pound. So if I'm coaching a client, depending on if I'm getting real nuanced, I might push that to 0.5. It might be as low as 0.3 to 0.35. But for the sake of making things easy and starting out, 0.4 is a really good starting place. So if I take that off of 150, I believe it's 60 something. Let's just say, for the sake of ease here, I think it's right around 60. Let's just say it's 60 grams. So 0.4 times 150, let's just call it 60 grams of fat. Now what we're going to do, so you see here we have to fill in the rest with carbs. Okay, how are we going to do that? We're going to take the total calories from protein, which is going to be, so we're going to take that 150 grams, we're going to go back up here to our calories per gram. We're going to multiply 150 times 4. It's going to come out to 600, okay? So 600 calories is 150 grams of protein. We're going to do the same thing with fat. We're going to take that 60 grams. We said it's about 60 grams. We're going to multiply that by 9. Okay, we're going to 9 times 6, 54, 540 calories in 60 grams of fat. We're going to take that 600 calories from the 150 grams of protein. We're going to take that 540 calories from the 60 grams of fat. We're going to add those together. Okay, so you're going to get 1,140 calories from fat and protein combined. To fill in the rest with carbs, we're going to work backwards now off of your total. So if we know we have to hit 1,500 calories in this example, we're going to subtract that 1,140 from the total calories of fat plus protein. We're going to subtract it from that 1,500. We're going to get 360 calories, because remember we just converted to calories, we're working off total calories. 360 calories from carbohydrates. To figure out how many grams that is, we're going to take that 360, come up here, we're going to divide that by 4, because remember we're working from calories, so we're going to go backwards. 360 divided by 4 is going to be 90. So we have 150 grams of protein, 60 grams of fat, 90 grams of carbs. And if I take those and I run those through again, convert them to calories and add them up, 150 times 4 is going to be 600. 60 times 9 is going to be 540, and then, so again, that's 1140, and then 90 times 4, 360, 1140 plus 360, 1500. So I think 60 might have been right. Hopefully my math is right, but you get the idea here, right? So this is a good kind of just like good, really pretty fairly reliable starting point. Especially if you're not eating that well now, right? Like you're going to be cleaning up a lot with this. The beautiful thing about this is that it's very self-limiting. So we're going to get into food sources here in a minute and like kind of healthy whole food sources. These macro ratios very much limit you from eating, like very crappy food. If you ever heard, some of you out there might be familiar with IIFYM, or if it fits your macros. And basically that just means you can eat whatever you want so long as it suits the ratios that we set. But what you're going to realize is with proper ratios like this, you're not going to be able to get away with eating a lot of garbage, because you're going to quickly, like if you just try to gorge on some cookies, you're going to blow these macros open pretty quickly. So it works very well, especially if you're coming from like 0 to 1, so to speak. And I always tell people also with this, right, and with any diet protocol, like as long as you're doing this, you know, at least 80% of the time. If you have more fat to lose or you're a little ways off from being in shape, you might want to go more like 90% of the time, 95% for a while. But we adhere to what we call the 80-20 rule, right? Like as long as you're doing this 80% of the time, 90, 95 if you've got a little further to go. And the rest of the time, or those few cheat meals, right, 1 to 2 cheat meals a week, again, depending on how far you are from your goal. If you have a lot of weight to lose, you might not want to do that early on. But as long as we're doing this most of the time, it'll work. We don't want to be a slave to it, but we do want it to be a lifestyle, right? So now we get into food sources here. So we're just going to do kind of a rundown. Going to be pretty obvious, honestly. Eating clean, again, that 80 to 90% of the time to fit these macros, unfortunately, is kind of boring unless you consider eating clean whole foods very exciting. If you have any type of restrictions, like if you're vegetarian or vegan, for example, obviously these animal sources of protein aren't going to be for you. You can, I'm sure, hopefully those of you out there who are on vegan, vegetarian, have figured out other ways to meet your protein. You can do that with plants, you can do it with grains and legumes and whatnot. It is a little harder, as again, I'm hoping most of you know, just because you do need what's called a complete amino acid profile to qualify as a complete protein source. The beautiful thing with animal protein is they come with a complete amino acid profile. Amino acids are the building blocks of protein in the body, and they're not optional. You need all the essential amino acids. So animal sources are perfect as it is. You have to get a little more crafty, but it can be done if you're not eating animal protein. So just be mindful of that. So when we get into protein sources, it's real straightforward. Animal sources: beef, fish, chicken, turkey, etc. Really any animal you can think of. Eggs and egg whites, and then I also have here whey, and that's obviously going to be sourced from protein powder. I tell people don't do protein powder. Only do protein powder if you're not able to get in all whole food sources of protein. Ideally, you want to eat whole food sources of protein. There are several reasons for that. But if you can't, and you're struggling to get to these protein requirements, right, then a good grass-fed whey protein can be a good thing. And then I also list here, it's kind of a caveat for some, but obviously dairy is a great source of protein. It is a complete protein. It's just that dairy, it's no secret, it can make a lot of people, there are intolerances and there are reactions to it. That's from a few things. It's obviously the lactose first and foremost. A lot of people are intolerant or sensitive to lactose. For some people also, it's the way the casein protein in dairy metabolizes. So obviously, you know yourself best there. If you can tolerate it, dairy works as well. When we go into fat sources, so most of the fats you're going to get are going to be from these animal sources here. For supplemental fats, again, so I rewrote, even though it qualifies under animal fats, obviously if you are eating, dairy fat is considered fat. Dairy fat, again, because dairy can be inflammatory, again, it's not the best source of fat, but it does count. And again, it counts under that animal fats, but I just listed it here because a lot of people aren't going to be eating it. Oils as well for supplementary fats, so if you're struggling to get the fat requirements in. Coconut and olive oil are like definitely the best too. Avocado oil is good. When we talk about, so I'm not going to go off on the rabbit hole about seed oils. That's a huge controversy these days. I think the jury's still out on seed oils. More so for brain health and gut health and things like that, inflammatory markers. But could you get away with eating seed oils? Yes, you could still hit fitness goals, again, assuming you're healthy with seed oils. Are they the best sources of oil? I think everyone would agree that they're not, even if that doesn't mean they're bad for you. They're not optimal. So we're talking about things like canola oil, sunflower oil, vegetable oil, etc. In general, really I always tell people like coconut and olive are just absolutely tried and true. Avocado as well, and there's just, also we should mention, just eating avocado is actually a very healthy source of fat. So, and then there's nuts and seeds. Again, some people do have some issues digesting nuts. Be careful because not all nuts are nuts. Just a fun fact, like peanuts, for example, are actually legumes. And they can be inflammatory. It's no secret a lot of people with peanut allergies. They can be inflammatory to a lot of people. So always kind of just process how you're reacting. But at any rate, nuts and seeds work for obviously many people, and they're good, healthy sources of fat. When we go to carbohydrates, we have obviously fruits and veggies as well. We're going to talk about veggies down here. I put it down here for a reason. We'll talk about it in just a second. But we got fruits and veggies. We have potatoes. Best sources is going to be sweet potatoes as far as the glycemic index goes, great source of fiber, etc. We have grains, so this includes everything from whole wheat to quinoa to different types of rice, etc. Again, some people are sensitive to grains. Obviously, a lot of grains do contain gluten. A lot of grains are sprayed with certain pesticides or folic acid and whatnot, and can be difficult for some people to digest, or they may cause allergies in a lot of people. A lot more people than people would think are at least somewhat sensitive to grains. So obviously experiment with those. I always tell people like really your best bets with grains for most people are going to be like rice and quinoa. Some gluten-free oats can be fine, things like that. But again, see how your body responds. You know your body best, but grains are fair game as far as carbohydrates go. And then there's legumes, so that's beans and lentils and whatnot. Again, for a lot of people, beans and lentils can be hard to digest and inflammatory. But like we just said, like we're saying, you know your body best. They definitely count as carbohydrates. And then obviously if you are eating, like I put here, carbohydrates from dairy sources are, you know, viable carbohydrate sources if you're eating them. So now we kind of go into like, so I have here veggies, keto carnivore, intermittent fasting with a question mark. So what about veggies? What about keto carnivore diets, which we'll touch on in a moment? What about IF or intermittent fasting, which you may have heard of? So first, let's talk about veggies. So veggies definitely in the carbs, and you should be eating as many, especially green veggies, as you can. The reason I put them down here is because they don't technically count towards your total intake of carbohydrates for the day. And that is because of a few reasons. Number one, vegetables do not spike insulin, which is the mechanism with which basically your body recognizes and partitions a carbohydrate as a calorie, as a unit of energy. So vegetables won't do that by way of their fiber and just by their what we call glycemic load. And also, given that, and just given their general profile of nutrition, of the vitamins and minerals, the fiber content, the antioxidants, etc., I always tell people, load up the plate with as much as you can at as many meals as you can. So think of them as kind of eat more, fair game always. Next one is kind of keto carnivore, right? So what's going on with that? It's very trendy these days, keto carnivore. Should you go keto? Should you go carnivore? So keto and carnivore are useful in some scenarios. So keto is being studied currently for the treatment of many mental health disorders as well as epileptic issues in people. So there is a real medical case for keto, and that literature is very promising. Also, if someone has quite a bit of weight to lose, so if someone is obese, we might do something that is or looks like a keto diet for a period of time, just because their insulin sensitivity or the way they can process carbohydrates is going to be so poor at the outset that we really need to keep those carbs down or close to zero. Carnivore is the same thing, although even more restrictive. Carnivore is a little bit more controversial because with carnivore, you're talking about, if you're doing strict carnivore, you're talking about taking out all veggies, all carbohydrates, really all sources of fiber. There are a lot of dietitians who are gonna shit on this, like, that's not healthy, you can't do that, you cannot have fiber, you can't saturate fat. I'm not here to debate that issue. I think the jury's still out. We need studies on it. We really don't have any long-term studies. What I'll say is this. I personally know people, I've seen many people online, some high profile, who have gone carnivore and changed their life. Every health marker improves. They feel better mentally, they drop a ton of body weight physically. They're healing autoimmune diseases like psoriasis and vitiligo and things like that that are previously thought to be incurable autoimmune illnesses. So I think, again, I'm not endorsing anyone. This is no endorsement to go out and do a keto or carnivore. They are very restrictive. There is an adaptation period, and if you're going to do one, you should be supervised by somebody that knows what they're doing. But at any rate, these diets can be very powerful for medical reasons. And I think that we shouldn't discount that and discount people's experiences. If all someone's health markers improve in every measurable place across the board, I'm not going to tell them like, oh, well, this is going to kill you. The other thing is the bad rap that carnivore gets is the saturated fat, because you're eating like basically all saturated fat sources from animals. And that's just, again, that's a whole other topic, but the push about saturated fat being bad for your heart and dietary cholesterol being bad for cholesterol, a lot of that stuff has been debunked. There's quite a wealth of information about that today. It has roots in what we call the big agriculture, or well, really the big sugar, quote unquote, industry influencing the agricultural industry and the dietary guidelines many decades ago. You can look into Ansel Keys and what we did with sugar if you want more information there. But the data is not exactly so straightforward that just because you're eating the saturated fat, it's going to kill you. It looks to be a lot more like eating processed fats and foods is what's responsible for diseased heart states and things like that, and the obesity epidemic, which leads to heart disease and high cholesterol. And if someone is getting healthier and all of their markers are improving on a carnivore diet, it just seems pretty silly to me to suggest that that person is in some way harming themselves. Again, the jury's still out, no endorsement, but I don't deny people's experiences. So these two can be very powerful for medical issues. Again, probably beyond the scope of what this is for. This is for kind of fitness, for people that are already well, so to speak, but trying to get in shape. If your goal is to get in the best shape, like be able to get the best lean muscle definition, get as strong as you can, get as lean as you can, get the best pump you can, these are, again, for most people, there are outliers, these are probably not going to be the best way to do that if that's your primary goal. Cutting carbohydrates down lower to zero is going to drastically reduce, at least initially, your explosive power output, your strength, how lean and sort of striated and full you can get. Carbohydrates, any bodybuilder will tell you this, carbohydrates fuel your muscles, which what's called glycogen. Glycogen is your muscle's most usable source of energy, and glycogen is largely what's responsible for that wicked pump and that very striated look that people who are very lean and very muscular get. So if your goal is like pure aesthetics and or strength, can it be done with this? Yes. Is it a lot harder, and is it rarer that someone can exceed, can excel and exceed goals with it? Yes. That being said, I've had clients, and again, you know your body best, who just know that they don't do well with really anything beyond a very low carbohydrate intake. And they're at their leanest and feel their best. So some people cut the carbs down, right? And they lessen so much inflammation, and they take off so much body weight that they actually feel stronger, move better, or are obviously leaner, just because they couldn't tolerate, for whatever reason, the carbohydrates. And now their joints feel better, they sleep better, so their health improves, their fitness improves. So it really is individual. And I should say, like, kind of piggybacking on that, These are just kind of like, I've had clients where we have abandoned this and we've basically, again, like cut down their carbs. We, in that case, boost the fat. So something to note is if you're going to play with fat and carbs, they are very much inversely related. Okay, so protein has to stay the same no matter what. This is just for basic health and especially fitness. You want to be getting in that 0.8, 0.7, 0.8 to 1 gram per pound no matter what the goal, no matter what the diet. After that, if you do better with fat, you cut down your carbs. Just know that as you cut down the carbs, you got to boost the fat up. You still got to hit that total intake, and you have to have what we call primary energy source, whether you're going to rely on ketones from the fat or you're going to rely on the glycogen from the carbs. You got to have one. You still got to be hitting that total, so you got to fill in whatever you cut. So just food for thought, and for those people that are interested in keto carnivore, definitely something that some people feel great exploring. Last point here, IF, or intermittent fasting. So what is that for those of you that don't know? Pretty popular, kind of peaked, I'd say, in popularity maybe a few years ago. I was doing intermittent fasting almost 15 years ago when it kind of started in popularity. So there's a lot of mixed data and sort of mixed adaptations and opinions on it. Basically, intermittent fasting is what we call time-restricted eating. So you'd be eating all of your caloric intake within a time limit, within a certain window of the day. So for a lot of people, very popular, I did for years, what was called a 16-8. I would fast for 16 hours in a day. I'd eat all of my calories within an 8-hour window. Some people do a 24, so 20 hours fasted, 4-hour window. Some people do 1 meal a day, or OMAD, 1 meal a day, where they just eat all of it in one meal. That's a lot harder to do, obviously. Some people do 14-10, 12-12. 12-12 is a little closer to just like kind of norm, but it is a little restricted for a lot of people. Some people just do one 24-hour fast per week and then eat normally for the other 6 days of the week. It can vary. There are advantages, and like everything, in biology we say there's no free lunch, there's only trade-offs. There are advantages and disadvantages. So what a lot of people report on the pros with intermittent fasting, sort of the list of pros, is they have increased energy, ironically. You wouldn't think so, but once you adapt, you do go through a period where you're very, very hungry. There's a hormone called ghrelin that's responsible for your hunger signals that kind of re-regulates itself once you start to fast regularly. I always tell people, if you're going to try this, don't do it all at once. Push your meals back to that window gradually. So you don't like eat your hand off when you're starting out. Over time, you will notice, even after a few weeks, that you can easily go 24 hours and not think about food once you get good at it. A lot of people report a lot of mental clarity and physical energy while that's happening. And that can be due to several reasons. Number one, and I think first and foremost what's happening is a lot of people's digestive systems from the foods we eat and the way we live, right, are very stressed out. Digestion itself is a stressful process to the body, actually. Every time you eat food, the body has to expend energy to digest food. And if your digestive system is not going so great from years of poor eating or poor lifestyle habits, it can really take away from your cognitive and physical energy to be eating all the time around the clock. You're never really giving your body a break. What you get with intermittent fasting is you can feel the kind of reset occur in your gut. You're going to increase the acidity in your stomach. Your gut flora is going to turn over. There is a process in your body-wide called autophagy that takes place, which is basically you have cells getting rid of cells that are dead or not working so well. And fasting is one of the only states in the adult life where that happens at a high level. So there's a lot of benefits. I've seen, again, there's mixed research on the hormonal benefits. So during a fast, I had always seen research that you do get a spike in IGF-1, which is growth hormone. You definitely get more what we call insulin sensitive, which means when you do eat carbs, you'll be able to utilize them better. Like we said, it does give your gut flora a break. There definitely is your body during a fast will actually begin to produce ketones, which is what we aim for in ketosis or when we eat keto, which does have a number of cognitive effects. anti-inflammatory effects throughout the body. So those kind of things will happen. Conversely, though, I have also seen data saying that fasting, especially for too long, will very negatively impact, like, for example, your androgens or your testosterone production. It obviously, I think that all of those things, so from my experience, again, the data is very mixed on this. From my experience, the real downside to intermittent fasting is that you can get so good at fasting, which I did for a while. Like, I could not eat for 2 or 3 days at one point and wouldn't notice, that you just end up running on adrenaline, and you end up getting into too much of a caloric restriction across time, and then that starts to have negative effects. Because remember, even if you're going to fast, you still got to be hitting your caloric intake for, even if you don't get it one day, if you do a 24-hour, if you do IF for 24 hours, you still need over time. So think about it, maybe extrapolate it to the course of a week. You still need to be getting in that weekly worth of calories. So important to make sure that we're not over fasting and we're still getting the calories in. And I think that's the biggest trap that people fall in. And obviously there are considerations, like if I have a client who has a history of an eating anorexia, something of the sort, right? That's the last person I want fasting. If I have someone that already struggles to get their calories, and if they're always coming in under maintenance or under where they're supposed to be, kind of the last person I want. So you got to tailor it to who are you and who's the person in question. But can be very useful. Definitely some benefits as far as like a cognitive effect, physical effect. For years, I used to train in a fasted state. Contrary to what people might have heard, it's fine to train in a fasted state. Again, research shows you might leave if your goal is like maximum strength and power, you're going to be leaving a little bit on the table. But in the long run, unless you're like a competitive bodybuilder or athlete, or a competitive powerlifter or athlete, it's really not the end of the world. It's really just whatever you feel best with. And if you're going to do daily fasts like 16-8 or 14-10 or anything in that sort, again, their data is very mixed on should you push your breakfast back or should you push your dinner or your last meal up and then stop eating earlier. And I always tell people, really, I've seen arguments for both. It comes down to preference. Moving on, we go into, we're not going to really stick on this much, but carb cycling. Carb cycling is a more advanced form of eating where you would actually vary the carbs you eat each day based on your output. So like on a training day, you might need a heavier carb load, on an off day a lighter carb load, and then on maybe a more moderate training day or something of the sort, maybe just a cardio day, a more moderate carb load. And that can actually be very beneficial for kind of getting people unstuck from plateaus. It's more of an advanced concept. It's difficult to incorporate in real life because it's a lot of preparation and work, a lot of calculating. Really, it's something that bodybuilders use, and with great success, bodybuilders will tell you that. Not necessary, but if you are kind of following this for a while and you start getting some plateaus, it can unstick you. More advanced concept, not really for the sake of this video, but wanted to make you aware of it. Next, we're going to get into hydration. So we want to be drinking, most people are chronically dehydrated, okay? We want to be drinking half of our body weight in ounces of water daily. Okay, so really easy, take your body weight, divide it by 2. That's the bare minimum. If you're more active or you're on the go, more and as much as you feel you need. But just know that we're talking about water here, right? Unfortunately, like coffee doesn't count, although we love it. It has its own. Coffee is definitely in moderate dosages, a number of benefits and whatnot, health benefits, cognitive. But fortunately, coffee is actually more dehydrating. So certainly not talking about coffee. Certainly not talking about beer. Should be implied. Or sugary drinks. Talking about water here, right? So drink more water. And then last, let's touch on supplements real quick. So again, we could do a whole other video about this, but I get a lot of questions like, what supplements, if any, should I take? How do I know it's good? How do I know it's not? And what I generally tell people is there's really only 2 categories of supplements that you need or might need. First one, and we'll come back to this in just a moment, is creatine. Especially due to some of the more recent literature that I've seen and literature we've had for a long time. Creatine is something that I would say most, if not everybody, should be taking. Not only does creatine give you definite output, strength and power output, like a noticeable, noticeably more strength, noticeably more power in the gym. That's by way of influencing what's called ATP, which is a muscle's primary and first energy source. Not only does it create more power and strength in the gym, and not only does it definitely give your muscles more of a full, kind of better pump, fuller look, but it actually, now we're starting to see research emerge more and more, has a ton of nootropic effects to it. So nootropic meaning cognitive effects. There are older studies on women who consumed creatine, and it had very profound effects on their depression. Menopausal women, I think, was either in that study or a different one. So, and again, I imagine it's for men as well, but studied on women, especially women's health and whatnot. Very powerful, surprisingly, antidepressant effect. Also just general cognitive nootropic effects. More recent research points out that it offsets sleep deprivation quite effectively in higher doses. So the standard kind of dose is like 5 grams per day. When you get into the 10 to 20 range, it really has a lot of cognitive and, like we say, that kind of offsetting deprivation of sleep effects. So really interesting stuff. Your brain uses a lot of that ATP, that energy source I'm talking about that the muscles use. So it makes complete sense. There used to be, way back when I was growing up like a teenager, there was a lot of like, it's bad for your kidneys and this and that. That's all a complete myth. It's 100% safe as long as you're getting a good form of creatine, right? 100% safe. It's really only going to benefit people. So creatine is the first one. That's something that I just say, everybody, try it out. Some people are what's called high responders, and they do really well with it. Some people could take it or leave it. Try it out. There's no harm in doing so. The only other kind of class of supplements that I say are worth it is if you have vitamin and mineral deficiencies. So if you, and common ones, let's kind of point out common ones. Definitely the most common, which I would say most people should be supplementing. However, you should get a blood test first, because too much of anything is not good. You can take in too much of it, and then there are some potentially negative effects. Vitamin D. Upwards 80+% of Americans, maybe 85% of Americans are deficient in vitamin D. We get our vitamin D from the sun. Even people who live at lower latitudes and warmer climates, we're walking around in clothes all day. Not enough of your skin is exposed to get enough. You'd also have to be outside for most of the day. Also, as you age, your skin does get damaged from various things, and that's going to affect how much you can absorb. So it's really, at this point, I think, like for most people, get a blood test. You want to see that blood test at between 60 to 80. Again, the range starts at 30 nanograms per deciliter, I want to say. I think it's 30, 32. And optimal range is 60 to 80. So if you're not in there, supplement to get there. I use, just for sake of transparency in this video, I do use what's vitamin D3 plus K2. You always want to take in K2 with it. K2 helps carry the vitamin D. I use a liquid formation by a brand called Seeking Health. It's in just liquid drops, put it sublingually under the tongue. And it's actually formulated in olive oil. Vitamin D3 is fat soluble, so giving it with olive oil helps the absorption, because it is often poorly absorbed in the intestines. So vitamin D3 is one common, again, get a test, but it's a common one. Magnesium is another very common one. Again, a lot of Americans are deficient. The magnesium in our soil is very depleted from just years of depleting the soil of minerals and just aggressive agriculture, pesticides, things like that. There are various different forms of magnesium. There's magnesium glycinate, which is going to be more useful for like anxiety and sleep. There's magnesium citrate, which is going to be more useful for aiding GI health. There's magnesium malate, which is going to be good for like the health of your bones and whatnot. So various different forms. Ideally, you want to be getting, like all of the forms. But if you have specific needs, just get at least the RDA requirement. If not, you could take in more. Again, poorly absorbed. A lot of implication in depression and anxiety. Magnesium is responsible for like 300 to 400 different processes within the body, so really not optional. I can't tell you the number of people I've seen who have health problems that improve, sleep problems that improve drastically by just taking magnesium. Let's see, so we have vitamin D, we have magnesium. B vitamins, another very common ones, a lot of people might know about these. B12 and B9 or folate, the two most common. Others are a lot less common in the developed world, could be there, but B12 and B9 really. And again, get a blood test for those. Get a blood test for all these just to know you don't want to be wasting your money and taking something unnecessarily. Especially the D3. Vitamin D3 is one that too much can be bad. B vitamins, you'll just maybe feel too revved up or pee them out. Your urine will be very glowing. Magnesium won't hurt you, but just to not waste your money, get a blood test if you can. It's good to know where you're at. But B12 and B9 are poorly absorbed and very often deficient in folks. I will say if you're eating good sources of animal foods and your gut health is decent, you should be getting enough B vitamins unless you have an absorption problem. There are people who have the MTHFR gene mutation and they need a very specific formulation of B9 or folate, a methylated version, and some people need a methylated, most people should be taking the methylated versions, period. But those people will have absorption problems, so they might need to supplement. You can determine if you have the MTHFR gene mutation with a very simple cheek swab gene test that your general MD can give you if you are interested. Very implicated in things like depression and anxiety as well. You'd be surprised how many people have mental issues and other unexplained physical issues from very common vitamin and mineral deficiencies. Last one that can be somewhat common, especially in kind of women and also in like ADHD, iron. Iron deficiency is a little more common these days, it seems. Again, not everybody, you don't want to just unnecessarily supplement iron because again, too much can have disastrous effects downstream, but get a blood test if you are. Obviously consequences of being low in iron is things like anemia, so definitely want to address that. Other than that, again, there could be other deficiencies. I can't think of any glaring off the top of my head. Those are kind of the main ones. But as far as supplements, you got your creatine. Everybody should be giving that a shot. And you have your vitamins and minerals. Other than that, most things you're going to buy are trash. Don't buy test boosters. People ask me about that. It's not real. There is one herb, there are two herbs. There's what's called Tongat Ali and Fedosia orestes. And sometimes they are ingredients in test boosters. But in those things, it's hard to even know how much is quantified. They do, each of them by different mechanisms and to different degrees, they can improve natural testosterone production. But you want to buy just the high quality, just whole source of those herbs if you're going to try them. If you buy it in a test booster from GNC, really what you're going to get is probably trace amounts of that, not enough to make a difference. And you're going to get a lot of vitamins, like I mentioned, magnesium, zinc, B vitamins, things like that. They're just, it's a selling point. The only real way, other than cleaning up your lifestyle, if your testosterone has room to come up, the only real way you're going to measurably improve testosterone in a greatly and usable way is exogenous testosterone from something like TRT, or if it's your bag, you're a bodybuilder, powerlifter, etc., anabolic steroids. So all the rest of the supplements are mostly noise. There are some out there that have a use. I'm not going to name specifics. I can think of some. Definitely some herbs and things like that, but they're more for like nuanced reasons. If you have a specific reason, then if you've done your research, fine. But in general, for fitness, you stick with your creatine. Most people are probably going to need some vitamin D, some magnesium, maybe some B9, B12. Beyond that, get it from food. So that's pretty much everything. Just remember, The best diet is the one that you can stick to. The best diet is the one that becomes a lifestyle choice that's going to be individual. I hope you learned something from this. Pair this with the Fitness 101. If you guys have any questions or comments, again, I'm always active in the comments section. As always, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.